Now, you've had to deal with the United Nations representing Israel. Just first on just that specific issue, where we have seen, motion after motion condemning Israel, accusations of genocide, of war crimes, even a case being brought by South Africa International Criminal Court to try and get a ceasefire sort of imposed effectively by sort of the world powers. Do you think the United Nations can in any way be a neutral arbiter in this war?
Well, they should have, but unfortunately, the Secretary General chose sides from the beginning. We haven't heard a clear condemnation of the atrocities on October 7th, and basically lost the trust of the Israelis. So it will be very hard for the UN to step in
He said very early on that this didn't happen in a vacuum.
Exactly. And no one can accept that. There is no justification to the horrors we suffered, and we are still suffering, by the way. 134 hostages, including women and children, are being held by Hamas as we speak. Ongoing atrocities are taking place as we speak, and the UN is silent about that. So I'm not sure the UN is relevant, but we do respect the voice of the international community. We speak with our allies, we discuss the issue, and we tell them that we have no intention to stay in Gaza. We are going to eradicate Hamas.
Israel left Gaza in 2005?
2005, exactly. 19 years ago, we left Gaza completely.
But we're constantly seeing marches on the streets of London saying, end the occupation of Gaza.
Well, they don't know the facts. I see the signs from the river to the sea. They actually put it on the Big Ben here in the UK. So where they want us to stay, if they want to have Palestine from the river to the sea. So also when they will say occupation, I would ask those guys on the streets, what about Egypt? They have a border with Gaza. So why you come to Israel? You can go and ask the Egyptians about the so-called occupation in Gaza.
Okay, and we know, of course, the Egyptians, there's lots of evidence now, evidence they are building higher and higher walls to stop people from coming through. It would appear they're not very keen on those people coming either. Lots of talk over the last couple of days of negotiations going on behind the scenes, basically being sort of orchestrated by Qatar, a nation state which for some reason is seen as a neutral arbiter in this debate, in this war, despite the fact they are harbouring not just Hamas terrorists but numerous other terrorist group leaders as well, who live, of course, in palatial grandness, great riches, while the people they claim to represent are on the ground being used as human shields. Lots of talk that there could be a ceasefire at the start of Ramadan on March the 10th, coming up very soon, a couple of weeks' time. That 6-week ceasefire could see more hostage exchanges with prisoners being held by the Israelis. How likely do you think that is?
We are moving forward very carefully, very cautiously. We don't want to raise expectations. The families are waiting for information every day. It's very hard for them. We are willing to pay a price for bringing the hostages back. We proved it in the past. And as you mentioned, yes, we're talking about a limited ceasefire. It doesn't mean we're going to end the war. We're going to end the war when Hamas will be eradicated. A limited ceasefire and the release of hostages. I hope it will happen. I cannot assure you it will.
But this is very limited. I mean, again, I think these talks have also been taking place in Paris. But, 40 hostages, they talk about freeing 40 hostages. So, as you say, there are 134. Particular concerns about now, given the information that has very slowly come out from hostages who have been released, and we know a lot of them have been released while other family members have continued to be held by Hamas against, again, the requests from the Israeli government and international agencies, where they've talked about the treatment they received and the treatment they saw meted out to others. Huge concerns about how those hostages are being treated. Starved in many cases. People come back even after just 50, 60 days, having lost huge amounts of weight, and able to get medicine, again, like many people, Palestinians in Gaza as well. But also the brutality we saw meted out on October the 7th. There is really now widespread evidence that brutality is being meted out to hostages as well.
It's ongoing. We have testimonials of people who came back about sexual harassment,
I think sexual harassment doesn't really quite do justice, does it?
Yeah.
We're not talking about a slap on the bum.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the details because of the families, but we heard horrible things.
We're talking about brutal torture and rape.
Unfortunately. And that's a real dilemma, Julia, because today we have to decide whether we're telling no, we want to bring all of them back in one deal, or we actually accept the offer that was put on the table by the negotiators that we're going to get only a partial group of 40 to 45 hostages.
The thing about the hostages is we know the reason why they didn't just accidentally end up with a load of hostages. Hamas went into Israel to brutally murder and rape and kill, and to seize hostages. And the point of the hostages was to use them as a negotiating tool. When you're encouraged by the West to give in, to accept ceasefires, to stop, say, taking, bombing and seizing of Rafah in the south of the country, is that not Hamas's taking of hostages working?
Well, first, you're absolutely right. They planned it. When we looked into the tunnels today, we thought they actually built cages to keep the hostages. It took them years to build the mechanism and the cages and the prisoners and the prisons inside the tunnels. So everything was planned in advance. They know that we are very sensitive to human life and they will be willing to pay a price. And actually, they are right. But one thing they were mistaken. It is about the determination that we have to go all the way this time. I don't think they imagine that they will be hiding today in the tunnels of Khan Yunis and Rafah, and we are determined to go all the way. So that's
when you say all the way, a lot of people will be very worried about that, and I don't think there is a right-thinking person in this country or anywhere else who is not concerned about innocent Palestinians, particularly children who have lost their lives in tens of thousands in Gaza. I understand the right to self-defense for Israel. I don't know what that means if it is not to destroy the terrorist group living as your neighbours who launched that attack on you and who've said they will want to do that tomorrow and the next day and the next day if they get the opportunity. But you know as well as I do that innocent people, particularly children, are dying and being mutilated, by bombs as a result of that policy. When you say go all the way, what does that mean?
So first, the blame for all the suffering, and we cannot ignore the suffering, is on the shoulder of Hamas. They initiated this war. We had a ceasefire with Hamas until October 7th. They broke the fence, kidnapped our families, raped our daughters, and now they are complaining. We were trying to minimize civilian casualties.
Well, hold on a minute, but the civilians...
Let me answer your question, Julia. When I say all the way, I mean we will chase down the terrorists. We have nothing against the civilians in Gaza. On the contrary, we are trying to ease the situation by allowing humanitarian aid to enter Gaza, hundreds of trucks.
But not enough.
We are not limiting the number. If the UK wants to send more trucks or anyone else, they are welcome to do that. We are not limiting the number of trucks entering Gaza today. And if we will decide, or when we will decide to go into Rafah, we will allow the population to move to another area.
Now, this is the key thing. It's people living in Rafah now. It's now like 1.2 million people, a huge number of people who came from Gaza City and other cities and settlements further north. They were basically told, go south because we're going to be seizing Gaza. And they've gone south. They've done what they were told. Big fuss about that basically, displacement of people. And now they're facing bombing in Rafah. We've seen refugee camps being bombed. Now,
let me correct you. Before we act in Rafah, I don't know when it will happen. It depends on the hostages deal. If we have an agreement, I think it will be postponed. No, it will happen, but not now. If there will be no agreement in the next few days, then I assume we will move faster on Rafah, but we will allow time for the population to move to other areas. We will build corridors that we will protect them from Hamas. They will try to prevent them from moving out.
We have seen bombing of people on those supposed humanitarian corridors being blamed on either side.
Well, Hamas wants to keep them as human shields. Our goal is to allow them to move, and then we can fight the battalions of Hamas who are still in Rafah. We're talking about 4 battalions of Hamas in Rafah today.